Welcome to the Mitten Mysteries podcast, hosted by Haley V.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Mitten Mysteries podcast. I am your host Haley V. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you are new here, we like to talk about all things creepy, strange, and unusual. Basically anything weird that happens here in Michigan, I'm going to cover it here on this podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you guys subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening from today. And if you do enjoy this podcast today, please give us a 5-star rating and review. It really does help us out. Also, if you want to, send this to a friend who you think would enjoy listening and learning about all the things we talk about here today. You can follow us over on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube at The Mitten Mysteries. If you guys are excited as I am to learn about all these creepy, strange, and unusual things here in the Mitten State, keep on listening. Now, before we get into today's topic for the podcast, we're going to go ahead and read one of our stories from one of our listeners. We're going to be doing this every podcast in the beginning so you guys can hear some creepy stories from everyone else around in the Mitten State. So this story comes from the tiniest of Freds, and it starts off by saying, "Hey, love the podcast, so here's my story. So this experience did not happen to me. It happened to a family member I was close with, and every member of the family agrees on these events. This took place in Garden City, Michigan. A mother and father bought this 2-story, 3-bedroom home for them and their 3 kids. Everything for the first few months were normal and pretty typical, until one day the father was at home alone watching TV relaxing. He was sitting in a recliner, assuming he was home alone, until he heard what sounded like someone running down the hallway upstairs. He got up to see if it was his wife that had gotten home without him noticing. He called out to her to see if she was there. He got no answer. Chalking it up to him hearing things, he goes back downstairs to his chair. A few minutes later, thump, 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 down the hallway upstairs again. Again, he goes up to check if it was one of his kids messing with him. Checks every single room, but no one is there. A few weeks go by with nothing else happening, until again the same situation. The father is home alone watching TV and he hears somebody running up and down the stairs. One of these two things would happen about once a week until one night the husband and wife had finished putting the kids to bed and were in bed themselves. Their bedroom door was cracked open and the husband and wife hear thump, thump, thump down the hallway, and they see a shadowy figure run past the door and towards the bedroom where the 2 kids slept. The husband assumes it's his son and gets up to put him back to bed, but once he gets up and goes out into the hallway, he doesn't see anyone. He goes into the child's bedroom to see both of them fast asleep. He goes back into his room, and a few minutes later, the same thing happens again, and again. Both kids are still fast asleep. They also had an incident where they couldn't find their wife's car keys or house keys. They tore the house apart looking for them and couldn't find them anywhere, until finally found them at the very, very bottom of the kids' toys chest, under toys they hadn't played with in months. But none of the kids had been home that day. The family finally decided to do some digging on the house, and it turned out that one of the previous owners was an elderly woman by the name of Kathy, who had passed away in the bathtub of the house. She had no family or friends, and it took weeks for someone to find her. Her dog stayed by her side for weeks until the dog eventually passed away too. For the few more months that they stayed in the house, any time one of these events would happen, the husband would shout, "Kathy, knock it off!" and it would stop. They sold the house and haven't had any events affect them since. Whoa, that is absolutely wild. And another little fun fact about me, I grew up in Garden City. That was one of the areas that I grew up in. So that's very interesting that I got this story. That's very creepy. I would definitely say that the house that I lived in when I was younger in Garden City was definitely a little weird too. I definitely felt something or some presence that was there. My dad has felt it too when he lived there. I don't know if my sister had, but my dad definitely did. So thank you so much for sharing. So if any of you guys have any more stories you would like to share with me on the podcast, just send them to themittenmysteries@gmail.com and I will go ahead and possibly read your story to our listeners. So today we're going to be talking all about Mackinac Island. Have you guys ever visited Mackinac Island? Have you guys ever heard of it? If you are from Michigan, you most definitely have either been there or have heard of it before. And if you're not from Michigan and you haven't heard of it, I'm going to tell you all about it today. And then we're going to go into some more of the hauntings and kind of creepy stories and legends behind the island. So Mackinac Island is very special to me and my family. Me and my husband, we love it there. It's one of our go-to places where we can go and just escape reality. Like, I mean, actually, like, go back in time, and it will just be us and horses and fudge, carriage rides. It is an incredible experience. If you've never been to Mackinac Island, I highly suggest going. If you are going to be taking a trip to Michigan and you want to visit some cool places, go to Mackinac Island. So those of you who do not know about Mackinac Island is a place where there are no motor vehicles allowed. So that means nothing with an engine is allowed on the island. Now, of course, they do have, the fire truck or the ambulance and a police car, but they do not allow residential cars on the island. So it's only horse-drawn carriages, bikes, that kind of thing. Mackinac Island is actually the place that me and my husband honeymooned after our wedding. We stayed at the Lilac Tree. We've been to a couple different hotels on the island, but Lilac Tree is definitely one of our favorites. It is the sister hotel to the Chippewa. It's owned under, I believe, the same owners of the Chippewa Hotel. So they're like sister hotels. But the Lilac Tree is definitely our favorite hotel on the island. The rooms are very spacious. The price is really good for what you get, and the amenities. They have a beautiful spa downstairs in like the basement area. I know basements sound like they could be creepy, but this one is beautiful. It's so relaxing. On our honeymoon, we got a couples massage, and I think it was like a 90-minute massage, and it was incredible. They also have it decorated in October for like Halloween. Mackinac Island during October is probably the best time to go, in my opinion. They have spooky ghost haunted tours. They take you, around like the island on places where spooky things have happened or, murders have happened. They take you and they tell you all the stories and legends about everything. I really recommend doing that tour if you guys do go to Mackinac Island. I also recommend doing the horse-drawn carriage tour around the entire island. They'll take you with a bunch of people on a horse-drawn carriage, and they'll take you and tell you all of the history about the island on that tour. So yeah, I figured I would start this series about Mackinac Island because it is one of mine and my husband's favorite places to visit. We are actually going in October to visit again for our anniversary. So we go every single year, multiple times a year. We usually will go in the summertime, and then we'll go in the fall for just me and my husband. We'll take our family like in the summertime, or even sometimes the springtime if we're up there earlier, but it's usually been like in the summer around 4th of July. We stay on the island, and then we go separately without our kids in October. So let's go ahead and take it back in time, and let's learn some history about why Mackinac Island is named Mackinac Island and why it is the way it is today and where its history comes from. So about 400 years ago, Mackinac Island was home to the indigenous tribes of the Anishinaabe people. It was home to the Odawa, the Ojibwe, and the Potawatomi tribes. The name Mackinac comes from the Native American name Michilimackinac, which means the place of the great turtle. And you're probably wondering why they called it a turtle. Well, back then it was because of the limestone bluffs, making it look like a turtle was coming out of the water. And if you did not know, limestone is one of the biggest conductors of paranormal energy. But yeah, it's named that because it looked like a turtle coming out of the water. That is why it gets its name. So in 1620, French explorers ventured westward towards the Great Lakes, and then they happened to call this area the New France. It took about 14 years, so around 1634, where the first European explorers had discovered Mackinac Island. And about 50 years later after that, the Catholic mission was established on the island. Moving forward to 1720, the Straits of Mackinac became the main transport route in the upper Great Lakes for the fur trade. Fur trade was very booming back in that time, and Mackinac Island was one of the main spots for the fur trade. So about 5 years before that, around 1715, the French built Fort Michilimackinac, which is located at the tip of the mainland of Michigan's Lower Peninsula, which would be known as Mackinac City now if you were to look on the map. So around 40 years later, in 1761, the French gave up the Fort Michilimackinac to the British during the French and Indian War. And in 1812, Mackinac Island came under the U.S. control after after the War of 1812. This included the famous Battle of Mackinac, where the British repelled an American attack on the grounds of what is now known as the Wawashgamo Golf Course. And this golf course is the oldest golf course in Michigan. So after the British gained control of Fort Michilimackinac, they moved it from the mainland onto Mackinac Island, onto the highest bluff, which is now known as Fort Mackinac today. You can relive many of these 19th century moments in time on the island today. You can go to the Fort Mackinac, and they have reenactments where they have soldiers firing the cannons and firing their muskets. You can go to several different spots on the island. There are many places to go on the island where you can relive many of those moments, so I definitely recommend checking that out. Around over 100 years ago, tourism really picked up on the island. Mackinac Island was named a national park in 1875, making it the second national park after Yellowstone National Park. This, I had no idea. When I learned this, my mind was blown. I could not even believe that. I thought that was so cool. Beautiful Victorian cottages started to be built on the island, along with many hotels, which we are going to be actually talking about today. And we're going to be talking about all the haunted history of each hotel, the ghost, etc. Entrepreneurs wanted to make Mackinac Island famous for its fudge, and I believe they have done that. Mackinac Island is very famous for their fudge, and it is delicious. I usually will buy a pack and it'll be gone before I even get back to my hotel. So yeah, it's pretty freaking good. In 1920, downtown shops created a way for customers to see the fudge being made in front of their eyes. If you're walking down Main Street and you're walking past these fudge shops, the smell that comes out of these fudge shops, it smells so good. It's just like such a nostalgic smell. Like every time I get off the ferry boat and I walk onto Main Street, the smell of fudge is amazing. That and horse fudge, if you know what I'm talking about. That doesn't really smell amazing, but the chocolate fudge does. Anyways, moving on. So what can you do on the island today, and what is special about the island today? You can come and travel around the island by horse-drawn carriages, just like they did back in 1920. You can stay in the hotels that date back all the way to 1852. You can tour the Biddle House and get a feel for domestic life on Mackinac Island during the era of the fur trade. You can fire a cannon at the historic Fort Mackinac, or explore the beauty of America's second national park, which is now Mackinac Island State Park. Some of my favorite things to do on the island is to ride my bike all the way around. I believe it's around 8 miles around. If you were to ride your bike from the Main Street all the way around, I believe it's around 8 miles. I definitely don't recommend going all the way around and then going up through the middle, or starting in the middle, going all the way up the hill by the fort. It is exhausting. I would say if you want to go towards the middle of the island, take the horse-drawn carriages, and then you can ride your bikes all the way around. But they also have, if you ride your bike halfway around, so I would say not even halfway, I would say like the first mile or two around the island, you can go to a place called Arch Rock. They have a ton of stairs that lead up to this beautiful geological site. It's pretty much a rock arch, which is created naturally with the limestone rocks. It is crumbling every single day. People don't know when it's going to collapse, but it's going to collapse eventually. They have tons of fun things to do on the island. So if you go to MackinacIsland.org, you can see all of the activities you can do, all the places you can visit, the history you can learn. So if you go to that website, I'll have it linked in the show notes. You can check it all out, where you can see what you would like to do if you're planning on a trip of going to Mackinac Island. That's definitely a website to kind of check out. But now that we're done with the brief history of Mackinac Island and the background of Mackinac Island, I'm going to fast forward it to talking about some of the most haunted, creepy places on the island. And the first one I'm going to start with is the Grand Hotel. Now, this Grand Hotel is a landmark on Mackinac Island. It's definitely the first thing that you're going to notice about the island when you're on the ferry coming over from the mainland to the island. That's going to be the first big white building you're going to see on the edge of this island. It is an extraordinary building. It is huge. This place is ginormous. This place, Okay, let me put it this way. The porch is 660 feet long. It is the longest porch in the entire world. Not only that, it is the largest summer resort in the entire world also. So the Grand Hotel was built in 1887. It was built in 93 days. It was built by Central Railroad, Indiana Railroad, and the Cleveland Steamship Company. Rates for a room at that time was anywhere from $3 to $5 a night, which would convert into $93.56 all the way up to $155.93 in today's money. The Grand Hotel was designed to be the most beautiful, prestigious summer resort in the world at that time, and it still is to this day. Even after many remodels and owners and expansions of this hotel, the look and feel of this hotel has remained the same ever since. No matter what they've done to this place, it has always been prestigious and very, how should I say it, bougie? Is that the right word? That's how I feel. It is fabulous. This hotel, the presence of this hotel is so big, and it definitely lives up to its name, that's for sure. Calling it the Grand Hotel, it's definitely grand. There have been many famous people that have stayed at this hotel, including 5 U.S. presidents. So that would be Truman, Kennedy, Ford, Clinton, and Bush. Also, some notable names that have stayed at this hotel has been Mark Twain and Thomas Edison. A little fun fact about Thomas Edison, he actually introduced the first phonograph to the public at the Grand Hotel. There has been 2 major movies that have been filmed here at the Grand Hotel, one of them being a really good movie that I love called Somewhere in Time with Christopher Reeves and Jane Seymour. The other movie would be This Time for Keeps with Esther Williams and Jimmy Durant. Another thing to note about this hotel is that proper attire is required after a certain time. So that means a suit jacket and a tie for men, and then a dress or something dressy for women. So like a skirt or a dress. So it's not a sweatpants and t-shirt type of deal after, I believe it's like 5 o'clock, or I lied, it's actually 6:30. After that time, you must be wearing a suit jacket and tie and a dress for the ladies at dinner time. I'm pretty sure that the people of the hotel, the workers, will let you know, hey, you gotta go up to your room, or hey, you gotta leave and change and come back into proper attire. They will not allow you to dine unless you have the proper attire to attend. My husband and I did dine at the Grand Hotel for dinner one night on our honeymoon, and the food was excellent. The steak was so good, and I couldn't decide what dessert I wanted to get, so our waiter, he brought me all of the desserts. I'm pretty sure he brought me like 4 or 5 desserts. He just brought them all, and he said, here you go, enjoy, and I did enjoy. I did in fact enjoy every single one of them. Another known thing about this hotel is that there is no tipping at the hotel whatsoever. So you cannot tip. Nobody will accept tips. If you try to give it to them, there's no tipping at the hotel. The Grand Hotel was declared a historic building by Michigan in 1957 and a national landmark in 1989 by the U.S. Now we are going to move on to all the creepy, spooky ghosts and legends of this hotel. So if you guys remember me talking about how Mackinac Island was a very sacred burial place for a lot of the indigenous tribes that had lived on the island way prior to the Europeans settling it. This comes into play with the Grand Hotel because legend states that during the construction of the Grand Hotel, builders unearthed so many bodies and bones that they simply could not keep track of them all. They eventually decided to continue building without removing the skeletons, and a lot of the workers just kept building on top of those bodies and skeletons. Some of them were removed, but not all of them. And with it being such a sacred burial place, I would imagine that that would cause a lot of paranormal energy to be emitted just with the disruption of the bodies and all of that. So I think that's one of the main reasons why there could be possibly a lot of paranormal activity inside of the Grand Hotel. Another legend states that guests have seen a woman in Victorian clothing meandering the halls at night, or even crawling into bed with hotel staff. The people that have worked at the hotel have witnessed this and felt this going on inside of their bed. Could you imagine being laying in your bed and you feel something at the end of your feet crawling up towards you, you lift it up and you see a woman under the covers? I'm just trying to picture that, and that scares me. That's like horror movie, like in the making. So now the island being isolated with surrounding water makes it a little bit more creepy, I would say, and I think that adds a lot of energy into these paranormal experiences for people, because I believe water is life and water has a lot of energy in it, and when you have a place that's surrounded by water, you're definitely going to get a lot of paranormal activity, that's for sure. One of the really creepy, spooky tales from the Grand Hotel involves a evil entity that appeared to a group of maintenance workers in the hotel's theater. One of the men claims that he felt a presence and looked up to see a dark shadow marked with 2 red glowing eyes, which proceeded to rush towards him and knock him out, sending him to the hospital. The man never set foot in the Grand Hotel ever again. The Grand Hotel is also home to a uniquely decorated piano bar where many have reported seeing an old man smoking a cigar and wearing a top hat in one particular section of the room. They claim that the distinct odor of cigar smoke can be only sensed in this area, indicating the presence of a music-loving spirit. In 1891, a woman dressed in black clothing with a veil concealing her face visited the hotel. She was accompanied by a footman and a maid-in-waiting. The woman in black never came out to socialize with other guests of the hotel, and she only left the confines of her suite 3 times a day, 8 a.m., 12 noon, and 7 p.m. to walk her large white Russian wolfhound. She would walk her dog up and down the hotel's front porch for half an hour while guests enjoying their meals are in the main dining room looked on. She was very secretive, never speaking a word, and no one seemed to know her true identity. The woman in black left as swiftly as she had somehow arrived. Some people reported a large black bird perched on the railing near the woman's room the day she departed, and the woman never returned as a guest, and her identity somehow remained a mystery. Some guests of the hotel who dined near the windows of the main dining room have reported seeing a woman dressed in all black walking a large white dog on the porch. Yet as soon as the apparition has been spotted, it vanishes before others can witness it. Other paranormal activity found at the Grand Hotel includes orb sightings in several locations of this hotel. One of the most active areas seemed to be the lobby outside of the main dining room. There have been many photos taken of these orbs at this location, as well as in the hallways near guests' bedrooms. Some other stories from the Grand Hotel is one winter when the Grand Hotel was closed for a season, a maintenance worker on duty reported multiple phenomena such as footsteps in the hallways, faint voices or whispers, and doors opening and slamming shut on their own for no reason. The maintenance worker was alone in the entire hotel the time of this occurrence. Another ghost believed to haunt the Grand Hotel is a young girl named Rebecca. She haunts the 4th floor of the hotel, and Rebecca was a guest at the hotel with her family. Unfortunately, it was reported that Rebecca fell out of her window that was in her hotel room, and she fell to her death. She apparently is a very sweet and kind spirit, and she is not out to haunt you or to get you. A lot of guests on the 4th floor have reported hearing the voice of a little girl saying hello or hi as they are walking down the hallway. So if you're on the 4th floor and you happen to get a room, make sure to listen out for Rebecca. She may be there. Now, the next haunted place we're going to be talking about on the island is called Mission Point. This hotel and resort is one of the most popular on the island today. There's plenty of things to do over at Mission Point. I know my husband and I have ridden past Mission Point plenty of times. We've never stayed there yet. We are planning to stay there eventually, but as we ride our bikes around the island, we always see Mission Point. We always see the fun activities that people are doing there. There's like a mini golf, and on the mini golf course at night they have like glow in the dark putt balls, so that looked really fun. And there's a couple other things that I know Mission Point are very well known for, but here's some of the history behind Mission Point. And after I tell you about the history, I'm going to go ahead and get into like the ghosts and the legends of Mission Point. So Mission Point was constructed between 1955 and 1965. It was held as a conference center for the MRA, which is the Moral Rearmament Organization. The MRA is a peace organization based out of Switzerland. They moved to Mackinac Island and built a property on there, which is now called Mission Point Resort. In 1954, they bought the land on Mackinac Island and started building what is now Mission Point, named after the Protestant mission that operated from 1823 to 1837 on the island. It included several structures that were originally built on the island, and that included the mission house and the mission church. So all the structures that were built around these original buildings. After about 10 years and plenty of construction and building phases, everything that was original was torn down except for the mission house and the Sheely Cottage. Now the Sheely Cottage remains, and it was moved from where it was before to now what is called the Small Point Bed and Breakfast. Now here are some of the structures that were built for the Mission Point Resort. There was an 800 seat theater for plays for the MRA to get their message across. They put on plays and musicals for their organization. There was the Great Hall A and B dorms on the hillside. There was the Straits Lodge dormitory, and that was west of the mission house. There was the film studio known as the Sound Stage, and this was a motion picture stage, and they also had a recording studio in there, an editing lab, and also a carpenter shop for the plays. And this was attached to the east end of the theater. Now this was the largest steel framed structure on the entire island that is still there today. In 1965 through 1966, the complex was turned into Mackinac College. Now 2 more buildings were added that were modern compared to the previous structures, which were more of that olden time colonial style buildings. These were more modern, and they had more of an appealing modern age. Now by 1970, there was only one class that actually graduated from the Mackinac College before the college closed to the students in 1973. In 1977, a Dallas property investment firm bought the property and converted it into the Mackinac Hotel and Conference Center. And in 1987, the hotel was restored and changed the name to the Point Resort by a businessman from Detroit named John Sheffield. Now that you know a little bit about the history of Mission Point and how it's gotten its name and where it's all started from, I'm going to tell you about the ghosts that haunt Mission Point. There is a lot of paranormal activity that happens here at the Mission Point Resort, and the main ghost I'm going to be talking about today, his name is Harvey. Well, that's his nickname. His real name has been undisclosed because of the family and wanting to keep the privacy of this person. So now Harvey's story goes in 1960 he was brokenhearted because he went to confess his love to a girl that he wanted to marry. Now these two were dating at the time, and unfortunately she did not have the same feelings as him when he did go to tell her about his feelings, and so she basically denied him and didn't have the same feelings for him. So after that happened, he was very depressed, very sad, so he walked up behind the Mission Point Resort into the wooded area, like on the cliffs, and he took a gun and unalived himself. Now, the weird thing about this story, there's a lot of sketchy, kind of suspicious things that have happened with this story. The story goes that he shot himself with a gun, but a man named Tom Clements, he's a researcher and historian for Mackinac Island, he talked to the Mackinac Island Police Department, and he did confirm with the police department that there were records showing that he was shot in the head twice. Is very suspicious is that if he was to have shot himself, I don't see how he could have shot himself twice if he shot himself in the head one time, he probably wouldn't be able to do it a second time. So there's a lot of speculation that possibly there was another person involved that may have actually murdered him. And maybe it was a jealous boyfriend of the girl that he liked. There's still a lot of speculation. This is not fact. So nobody really knows, but there is reports of him being shot in the head twice. That is what Todd Clements had talked to the police officers about from Mackinac Island. And so that is how the story goes, that Harvey was upset that this girl did not like him, and he was very distraught, so he went up on a cliff and shot himself in the head. And his body was found 6 months later. It was not found right away. He unfortunately had unalived himself in February, and his body was not found until 6 months later. So around July or August is when his body was found, and his body was found with 2 gunshot wounds to the head. The gun has never been recovered. The gun has been nowhere found around the area. So that's another suspicious thing that has happened. So this case with Harvey and his death is very suspicious and very sinister because there may be somebody else behind it. And it was just used as a cover-up that he may have unalived himself. So there's still no closure with that. They don't know for sure. They did call it a suicide. Now, Harvey is said to haunt the Mission Point Resort, and it's mostly its theater. There's been reports of lights going on and off. He's a bit of a prankster, so he likes to pull pranks because he is a young college student, or he was a young college student. So kind of like a little immature. He's very much a prankster ghost, so lights will go on and off, chairs will be moved, things will be hidden. There's been reports of girls being touched, and he likes when there's a lot of girls, and I think maybe he's trying to flirt with these girls. Maybe that's what's going on, but a lot of women have been touched. A lot of people have heard the voice of a young man, so like EVPs have been heard. There's been EVPs that have been heard saying, gun and shot and soundstage. So some have believed that maybe the gun could have been hidden in the theater. Nobody knows for sure to this day, but a lot of people do hear ghost EVPs when they are visiting the Mission Point Resort, and especially in its theater. There have been several other spirits that are said to inhabit the resort also. There's been reports of a young girl heard calling to her parents. There's been sightings of Native American spirits just wandering the property. And then there's also a woman heard singing old-time music near the theater. Now, the Mission Point Resort is just so haunted, in fact, that Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters filmed an episode there in 2010. I'm sure you can look it up on YouTube and find the episode where Ghost Hunters goes to the Mission Point Resort, and you can kind of watch that episode and see for yourself what they capture and what they have found. But slowly moving on, we're going to go ahead and head to an area that is right in front of Mission Point, and this is the Drowning Pool Lagoon. Now, this lagoon is said to be one of the most haunted spots also on Mackinac Island. And the story about this lagoon is pretty tragic. This is a legend, of course. There's no historical documentation of any of this information I'm going to tell you. So it is just a story and just a legend. So the story of the drowning pool starts in the late 1700s to 1800s. So now the story for these 7 women goes that they were working in the brothels inside of the island at that time. And the married men would come in and these women would bewitch them. Basically, tell them to leave their wives and do all of this stuff, have relations with them. And so when the married men's wives found out, they are the ones that accused these women, and then they brought them to the lagoon, and then they would torture them until they admitted that they were witches and that they were using dark witchcraft to lure these men into having relations with them. And if they did not admit to it, they would kill them anyways. Now, the way that they did this back in the day, they had this thing that looked somewhat like a seesaw. So they would put them at the end on a pole. Now, this lagoon is about 20 feet deep. So they would put them on a pole and then they would dunk them in the water. And they would try to get these women to confess that they were indeed using witchcraft to lure these men in. But if they didn't confess, then they also had another method where they would tie rocks around their ankles, like heavy rocks and they would throw them in. They sank to the bottom, then oops, I guess you were innocent and you weren't a witch. But if you floated to the top, then you were indeed a witch. So then after they would float to the top, if they did, which spoiler alert, they didn't float to the top because they were all innocent. They were not witches. If they did indeed float to the top, then they would take them and then they would end up hanging them. So their fates were pretty much doomed from the start. They died anyway. Now, when people do go to this area, the Drowning Pool Lagoon over by Mission Point Resort, they have captured voices and crying, noises of splashing water. People have seen shadows come up out of the water at night. There has been reports of women crying hysterically. So if you ever go to the lagoon, make sure you have your digital recorder or your camera or your phone out. Maybe snap a few photos, see if you can capture anything. But this, again, is just a legend. There's no documentation of this ever happening. So this is just a story and legend that's been passed on. But this is one of the most haunted areas. People have captured many things. So if you ever are around that area, make sure you guys document some stuff to see if you can catch anything. Now, the next few haunted things we're going to be talking about on Mackinac Island will be, of course, on the next episode of the Mitten Mysteries. So make sure that you guys go ahead and subscribe to this podcast. We're going to be talking all about all the other creepy, scary, weird things over on Mackinac Island in the next episode. So make sure you guys subscribe. Make sure you leave a review. Make sure you guys give us a 5-star rating if you enjoyed today's podcast. Make sure you guys follow us over on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. We have everything at the Mitten Mysteries. We love when people kind of get interactive with us and talk and chat and send us their DMs about their creepy stories or their legends that they hear. We love to hear all about that. So if you have a story that you would like to tell over on the podcast, just make sure you guys send that to us over on the email at themittenmysteries@gmail.com, or you can follow us over on Instagram and send us a DM there, or on TikTok too. We're over there too. I cannot wait to share what's in the next episode of this podcast with you guys. So make sure you guys come on back and listen. I hope you guys have a great week ahead, and we will talk to you guys later. Stay spooky, y'all.